All right. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the 63rd Automation Hour. If you are joining us for the first time, all lines are muted. And actually, if you have any questions, post it within the chat section or the question section of this GoToWebinar. We will be posting this recording sometime after the session along with the deck. And if you haven't signed up for the rest of our upcoming webinars, we are fully booked out for the end of the year. So as you see, we have a lot of great resources coming on to present community members as well as MVPs and new presenters as well. So if you do have a cool business use case that you would like to present with your process automation solution, direct message us and we will book you in to, probably not this year, but we'll keep you posted when we start booking for next year. And we cannot bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So thank you for continuing to sponsor us. And here are your co-hosts, David Litton, myself, and Rakesh Gupta. And with that, we are very excited to bring back Michael Barnes. He has presented to us before. So let me hand it off to him to introduce himself to you all.
All right, so I'm gonna show my screen here. So we can pull this up. All right, do you see my screen yet? I'm not sure which screen you're looking at. Can you hear me?
We see your PowerPoint.
You see my PowerPoint, great. Okay, so I'll pull that up. And so yes, I'm Michael Barnes. I'm Director of Salesforce.com Administration here at Golf Channel. So you'll see our new Golf Business Solutions logo. I work in the business solutions side of the business where we help golf courses to help manage their facilities. So we have about over 7,000 courses worldwide that are on either our distribution platform for Golf Now or partner with us on our T-Sheet products. So that's the side of the business that I help out with. So not the golf television business, but I'll help out with some of our back-end products like Golf Pass that we've partnered now with Rory. You see me and Rory here, though you might be able to tell he's a cardboard cutout. Didn't get to meet the real thing, though he did come speak at our sales meeting here in Orlando. So it was exciting to get to see him, and he's partnered with us on the Golf Pass product, to be the, to help us promote and develop that product. So if anybody's a golfer and you're interested, you might look into Golf Pass. But more about me, I'm a past presenter on Automation Hour. I'm also a past presenter at several Dreamforces, so talk about just different automation solutions that I really just love about Salesforce. Still working on getting my trailhead up to Mountaineer. I will be a Ranger by the end of this year for sure, and so one of these days I'll catch up to Jennifer Lee, who's got I think about every single one you can have on trailhead. But I'm trying to catch up. But I have received a few certifications, you can see as well. So, and about 9 years experience in the platform thus far. So that's all about me. The agenda today. So we're going to talk about the new and improved Flow Builder, or formerly called the Cloud Designer. So Flow Builder is a great tool for automating your processes. Of course, yeah, it works in conjunction with Process Builder. It's a different, if you're old school and just use workflows, those are great. They're solid. But if you want to really take your design to the next level, Flow Builder is and Process Builder where you got to get to. I'm going to show you today how you can embed a flow in a Lightning record page, and using some of the new Lightning Runtime elements, I'm going to show you how you can, from that Lightning record page, redirect the user to a newly created record, which is kind of exciting. That's something that you couldn't really do out of the box in Salesforce. There were some hacks that were available in the past and required a lot of custom code, potentially. Now you can do it with a custom Lightning component, which may look like code, but it's there. It's all, it's available to copy. It's really a copy and paste job, so it's really easy. I'm not a developer, so this stuff, custom Lightning components, frankly, scared me a little bit when I first saw them. And I haven't done a lot with custom Lightning components, though I use a lot of custom Lightning components that are developed by others. So I'm happy to copy and paste code, or to and download something from the App Exchange when needed. So ending at a newly created record, which calls the Lightning component that you develop, I can show you that it's not that scary, that you can do this yourself and develop an action that now it's reusable. You can use it anywhere in Salesforce, which is really exciting. And after I talk about that piece, I'm going to talk about some Flow best practices. These are just things that I've run into in the past with Flow, and if you're in there, there are things that can get you if you're not careful. So I'll get into those here momentarily. But before I do that, let's I've lost into my, take that off the screen. So everybody, I think, can see my Salesforce screen now. I'm in a development sandbox, and the first step that I'll show you is your Lightning record page. So on this, I'm going to be on the accounts object. So I'm just going to click into my account and go to my automation hour account that I've created here. And on this page, you can see I've created this new case tab. Now that's very easy to do, and if you haven't done this before, you can now in Lightning, and this is all in Lightning. So if you're not in Lightning, I highly recommend you at least start working on it in a development sandbox, become familiar with the tools and features. We are finally at the end of our migration to Lightning here at Golf Channel, and it's great. Most features are awesome. Still got some users that there's plenty of feedback coming in, so it's keeping me really busy on updating things. But the level of things I can do now on a Lightning record page is far superior than what I could do on a classic page. So for example, on my Lightning page now, I have more of a canvas that I can lay everything out on, and I can choose the format. Right now I've got this set up with a header, with a right sidebar, and then I have my detail section here. So that's what I chose when I started this, and I won't start from the very beginning. You can figure that out. You go to the in setup, just go to Lightning App Builder and just create a new, in this case, a record page. Or you could do it also from your custom from your objects. I could go to account and I could create a new record page on the account object directly. Either way works. And here I've gone ahead and dropped in the header section, which actually, if I get the right name for it, it's a highlights panel. So the highlights panel, which is all of this is controlled from your standard layout that you're used to. So you can actually still get there. You can see that it has your layouts, page layouts right here. So on the right-hand side, if based on the element you're clicking into, if I click on here, if I'm on my details, I click in, by clicking in here, changes what shows up on the right. And now I can see all my layouts that are available. And I can see this is, I'm actually, the current record I'm starting from is using this account layout, and that's based on my profile and based on the record type of the record I'm looking at. So it's stuff you're used to. If you're used to classic, it's actually, if you click in here, it'll actually open up another tab, the classic page layout. So that's still where you'll make your edits, define what's in your highlights panel, define what's on your detail page, and also define what'll be on your related lists, as well as buttons and other things. So if anytime you have any buttons you have here, actually will automatically be defined here in your Lightning experience, or you can override and set unique buttons just for Lightning experience if you want to by clicking the override. So just a couple nuggets there for you if you're not used to Lightning record pages. So now I'm on here and I've decided I really need a way for them to create a new case. And I could create a new case button. I've got a new case button that I could add up here. And I could start a new case, using it, which a traditional new case will, just ask me for record type and then give me the layout based on that record type and my profile, and that's it. But maybe I have a complex case, or I want to, based on the type of case they're asking for, I want to ask a lot of questions, and I want to make, and based on those, how they answer those questions, I'm going to have subsequent screens on the flow that will ask for more information. And so it used to be you could create a button, and there are ways to create a button and call a flow, but with with Lightning pages, you can now embed a flow into a flow component directly into the page. So here you can see I've got a flow component that embedded right inside my page, and I'm calling a specific flow. It's a drop-down choice of flows, so you can find them easily. And then all I'm doing is defining that I have a variable in my flow that is being set here as well. So now in my Lightning page, I've embedded my flow. Well, first, I might want to know where is where is my flow? So I'm going to go over here to setup, and let's take a look at the flow. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this backwards so you can kind of see here's the front end and here's kind of drilling back into the back end how it's set up. So here you can find my new case flow that I've created. And if I drill in and I open up this new case flow, I can see here's my new Cloud Flow Designer. So you'll see this looks a lot different if you've used Flow in the past, and hopefully you by now have noticed that the Flow Designer has changed dramatically. It's much more color coded. It's not all gray, so you can tell right away if it's a data element or if it's a screen or if it's a logical element. And then based on the icon therein, you can just quickly glance at it, figure out what's going on. And then you have these new elements: core action. Subflow we've had in the past, email alert, Apex you could call in the past, but the core actions are really cool. This is where I'm going to focus on today. So you now can do some things with the core actions, and you can also do some new things on screens that you could not do before. There's a whole number of new screen elements that are showing here that are more dynamic. So you have an address component, you have dependent pick lists. So before you could only do you could do a standard pick list. There was no way to drive dependency on the same page in a flow. Now that's been solved for, which is great. You can display images, make your flows pop a little more. You can send an email right from within a flow, or do a file upload, which has also been something I've been waiting for a long time, is to easily upload files within a flow. So you have a few different options here. The one that I'm going to, so I'm not showing you these components in particular. Again, I'm already using some of those in some of my newer flows. But the trick is if you use any of these components, whether it's going to be the core action or your, actually core action, yeah, I believe you still have to have Lightning Runtime, and same with anything on the new screen components. Your users have to be in Lightning, so they have to be in Lightning to use those. So it's another good reason to consider migrating, getting up into Lightning. And you also have to have your flow running in the right place. So as you saw, I've got my flow running inside my page. The flow buttons, at least for this particular action that I've created, will not work. So don't try it. I've already tried and then found on the, in the help in Salesforce that, that says very clearly, these may not work. These actions may not work from inside of a, if the flow is run from a URL button, for example. So that was one of the restrictions, but running from a Lightning page, it works great. So I've got my flow set up, and I won't go into the details of how the flow is constructed. It just has, basic initial screen, a decision based on the decision outcome. I have a couple other screens that may provide additional fields that they are required now that they've selected a choice here. So I can require certain information gets filled in my case instead of trying to write a bunch of validation rules, which is the other way you could do this. You could do this on a regular case page layout, but then they see all the fields and they have to go hunt and find the right fields made in the right section based on the record type they selected. But maybe in certain situations on this record type, certain things you want to collect certain piece of information. That's where the flow really gets, a visual flow at least, is very powerful for that. And then based on the decisions, I can then set, I can create the case and go to my action here, which as you'll see here, this is I'll start back here. I'll drag, like I'm dragging a new one on. If I'm dragging a core action on, first thing it's doing is ask me to search for more core action. So the core action that I'm going to find here is, I've named it navigate to record. So all I have to do is select that. Once I've selected that core action, I want to make sure I input a value, and I'm inputting my record ID, in this case, the case ID that I just created. So the idea is I'm starting on an account. I create a new case on that account, but I want to go navigate to that case in case I want to, maybe post a custom chatter message, or I want to just review what I just submitted. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to be redirected to the newly created case. And this is how you'll do that. So you'll just set your case ID there. So, geez, how do we get this core action? Let's look into that. So in this case, let's go back. I gotta go back here. So I'm just go ahead and get out of flow at this point. So in order to create that core action, this is where you need your custom Apex, or your custom Lightning component. So let's take a look at our Lightning components. So if I go into Lightning components, you can see that I have created a navigate to record Lightning component, but there's no new button. I can't create a new component right here. Well, geez, that's annoying. And how do I create a new component? Well, that is where you do have to put on your developer hat, and in if you click on the gear here, you'll see Developer Console. So we're gonna go ahead and open up Developer Console. And this is where you can create a Lightning component. Now this does require a little bit of code. This code is available on the Salesforce support pages. So everything I'm showing you here, you actually can search for and locate on the Salesforce support site. And in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and click open. Let's see if I can find it. Nope, I want to be in classes. Let's see, it must have to be in Lightning resource. Navigate to record, there we go. So this is the one I want to open. So you'll see in here in the Lightning resource, you have many different components that actually all comes in into the side. When you create a new component, it actually shows up all on the right-hand side to navigate within the record. So inside of your Lightning component, you have several different pieces. The component itself, which in this case, it's a very simple component. This was just copy and paste work from the Salesforce support site. So I didn't make any of this stuff up. I didn't have to invent this code, but it is a little bit codey. So you have to be just at least comfortable enough to get into Developer Console, which you saw me do. In this case, create a new Lightning component. That's what you're going to click on. That will get you into this area here. And then you click on each of these, navigate within the record to build each of these pieces. So I think the only ones I had to worry about were the component, the controller, and the design. And that was it. So this is what drives the component. So it shows up in my list. I had to choose the controller here, and I had to set up the design. So once I set these things up, it's just a matter of click, file, save, and now it's saved in my instance that I'm working with. Now, I recommend you do this in a sandbox, test it out, make sure it's all working, and then you can always deploy those things from sandbox to production. It will let you build these in production. Don't say I tell you that was a bad idea, but you can if you wanted to. You can build these right on the fly in production. There's no deployment absolutely required for Lightning components, which is kind of nice if you want to, make a quick change. If you want to just make a change to your label or something. No need to do a full deployment for that, for instance. However, you might want to update your sandbox as well. So that's really how the redirect works now. It's actually very easy to build the Lightning component. Once you've built the Lightning component and that's been saved, you will see your Lightning component available here. And if you go back into your flow, add your new core action at the end of your flow, you can now terminate your flow to a newly created record instead. And it has to be a screen flow, just as a catch you there. You can't do this on you can't use that element on an automated flow. That's, for instance, just run a back-end flow, because flows can be constructed, a couple different ways, but the flow I'm using is a screen-based flow. So of course, if you didn't have a screen-based flow, if I clicked on this and it just ran some job, then every time I clicked on this element, it would run that job, which in this case, I want to have to make some choices. So that's a good use case for this. And at the end, so let's show you how it works in action now that I've got that built. So let's go back. We're on our record page. Going back to the account, and I can click on new case. And I can say, okay, my subject is going to be, automation hour is awesome, and we really enjoy watching Mike type. And I can choose my case type. I've got just some standard case types that are in here, and I can click next. And based on that type, it's going to say, how do you like, just have to answer another question, which that could be variable. The next screen can be completely variable based on what's selected on the first screen. And I could collect, a lot more information if I wanted to relative to that particular case type. And then I click next. And it's now brought me over to the newly created case. Automation hour is awesome. So now I can post on Chatter to somebody, Michael Barnes, I just created the new case here. So this is the end of my first section. I have some more things to go through, but I just wanted to see at this point if there are any questions about how to set this up. This is just a feature that I've really been waiting for a long time, and I had to hack that, unfortunately wasn't really transferable to Lightning. So now I've had to figure this out in order to be able to, bring some of the automation I had in Classic into Lightning, and it does it a lot smoother and a lot cleaner than what my prior hack was able to do in Classic. So any questions?
We currently do not have any questions out there.
Okay, everybody's nice and quiet. So again, you can find this if you're looking for in Salesforce support, it's really just auto redirect to new record. I'll have to find that and see if I can post that onto the into the success community just to make it a little easier for everybody else to find. I'll look at that for after the automation hour is over, post that so everybody can easily get to that code that I found, because it was already on the Salesforce site, copy and paste, and it's easy enough to build. Just takes a little bit of understanding how it fits together, which hopefully I've showed you that and it makes sense. So a couple things about flow that I just wanted to share with you today that you may or may not be aware of, but there's ways to break your Salesforce instance with flow that in Process Builder as well. Actually, I'll start with one that's actually wasn't even on my agenda that I just ran into this week, that one of my admins caused a problem that I had discovered a while back, and I apparently did not share it as a gotcha to them, but I want to share it with you all so that you don't fall into the same trap. But if you're creating a new process, one of the things that you have to watch out for is if you have let's say you have a relationship record on your in your flow. So I come in here and I say, I'm doing this on I have a case, and a case may or may not have an account record. So what you have to be careful for here is I could say, yeah, I want to do something based on the account field, the account active, being true, yes. So the problem with this criteria right here is so I'm starting my process here from the case. Because I'm requiring an account relationship to look up the active field, this process will fail and will not run, and it will actually cause any record updates I do that are waiting for that change. It will fail if that account active if it can't be found. So in the case, if I have a case that gets updated that does not have an account relationship, it gets created like from email to case, for example, and the account relationship is not yet set because no one's looked at that case, and this process runs and it's looking for the field active on the account record, it's going to fail. So that's just a warning. There's a couple ways to handle that. I could first do a check to see, is the account set? So this is a maybe kind of a dirty way to do it, but this is what I've done this is say that the is null is false. So now I've checked to see if the account is set. I can save this one. This is no problem. Account set. And what I could do is, because it makes you have, this is a way to do it just inside Process Builder if you don't want to go another step further, which I'll share with you what you can do. I can say, I have to do something here. I could, I just have to say test, and I could say I'm going to update, select the case, it started. This is, again, somebody might have a better hack on this than me. This has been my hack. I can say account ID is a global constant, null. So I know that the count is null. It's not set. So if the count, let's see if I said this, the count is null is true is what I want to say. Sorry, let's say that's true. So I'm saying if the count is set, in this case, the count is set, I want to follow the true path because I want to stop right here. I want to not do anything else. For a case that doesn't have an account, I don't want to run that. But where the count is null is actually false, meaning it is set, then I can come back down and do my criteria that I just showed you before, where I can check on see if the account active field, is yes or no, right? So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for some criteria so active account, and hit save. So now I've got an account. Now I've created a requirement that does, in this case, it does require that my account is active or the account is set, but I'm checking to see if the account is set up front. The other way to do this is just to call a flow. So I could just say at the beginning, just instead of checking that field, I can check for anything on the case that I need to. That's no problem because the case is the first level record. So it knows that it has a case. But because I don't have an account relationship, I got to be careful that I don't try to look up anything on an account that may or may not exist in Process Builder, at least. In Flow, I could do this no problem with just looking up, just first do a lookup, say from this case, look up the account relationship. If the account relationship is null, don't do anything else. If it isn't, then do something else. And so with Flow, you can, it's a little more dynamic as far as how you can lay it out. Of course, with Process Builder, it's kind of like a flow, but it's a little more rigid. But it also can call flows, which is what I use Process Builder probably about half the time I build a process is to call out to a flow and start a flow. So these would be automated flows, not auto run flows, not screen-based flows. You cannot call screen-based flows from Process Builder, so something else to be aware of. Another thing that I found in Flow, and I'm gonna go ahead and go into Flow. Flow, you have to be careful because if you create a Boolean field, it's important that if you have a screen with a Boolean field, that Boolean field gets set with an assignment when you leave that screen. So for example, I have a branch here where I'm going to two separate screens. And if I have a Boolean field, like a checkbox, that's what that checkbox, true or false field, right? So if I have a checkbox field on my screen here, and I don't have it here, but I try to write that screen, that Boolean field that's showing on this screen over here, and let's say my path, I follow this part of the path, because I'm skipping this, that Boolean field is actually null. It never gets set to true or false. If you don't hit the screen, Boolean fields in Flow, at least assuming this is still true, my history has proven that they are ultimately set to null, and you cannot write a null Boolean field. So I couldn't do a case update of null. What I can do is from this set a resource. So I can go to manager, I can say I need a new resource, and I can set a variable, and I can say that that variable is going to be Boolean variable, and it's going to be false. So this is where you can, they use the term checkbox in some places, they use the term Boolean in others. Boolean is just for your variable that the checkbox will be used to set. So now I've got a global variable. Now I'm going to say this is my checkbox. And I'm going to go ahead and just click done on this one. So now that I've created my checkbox field, what I can do is I would probably want to break this up into two separate assignments, because I'd want to make sure that my assignment only sets that checkbox. So I'm going to say set checkbox. And we're going to say where the checkbox equals something on the flow, which I haven't decided what that is yet. So I'm going to go ahead and down here. And now I can come back up here. So now I've got two different ways that I can come into my flow. I've got the first path, which if I find a checkbox on here, I can add one, just add a checkbox. This is going to be, path one checkbox, done. And again, you saw that I made that variable false. That's because if I don't come to this, if I get checkbox, path one checkbox, and then on my create, if I had a, I'd have to set that up a little differently the way I did, but I'll have to, when I go to set this variable, if I want to create a new case and I'm actually setting a specific field on the case here, then I'd want to make sure that it came from a screen that I've hit or from a global variable. So in this case, because the global variable wasn't, if I take this path, this global variable is not set. When I get here, it's no problem. It's going to just read the global variable, which is default false, and it will set the checkbox to false, which is maybe what I want by default to go on that case. So that's just, again, watch out for Boolean fields. They can be tricky if you don't set them. Whereas text fields, pick list fields, it's not a problem, although it's still a best practice that after you have a screen element, I recommend, and I try to always do this and tell my admins to always do this, to take whatever you have in your screen and write all the screen elements into variables. That way you have them in variables, you don't have to worry about it. And then at the end of the flow, you can write them in. That's helpful if you have duplication of fields too, right? So if you have the same text field in this box as in this screen as this screen, as long as you're setting an assignment to a common global variable, then you don't have to worry about duplicating, the elements. You at some point need to, join them together so they can write a single record in this case. So I'll leave it at that. Another best practice, dynamic record choices. So one of the things I find is helpful is people ask me all the time, hey, I've got this pick list, but I want to manage the pick list. I'm going to have changes to this thing all the time. Well, geez, that's annoying. I've got to go within as an admin, wait for them to tell me they need a new pick list, go click into setup and go to the object and update the pick list, put whatever values they want. What if they could do that themselves? Wouldn't that be great? So what I've done quite often is create a custom object in Salesforce that will then contain records that I can then assign that object to that user or group of users, and they can go in and manage that object to their heart's content. They can set up all the records they want to be able to show that would show up in a flow pick list, and then later on when they come into their flow, they can just come in and use a dynamic pick list. So one of the elements on here is called pick list, right? So I have a pick list choice, so I can drag that in here, no problem. And from the pick list, I can, you have a couple different choices. So you always have to add your new resource. And I could just add a choice. That's no problem. A choice is something that's hard coded as an option within this flow. Better choices would be pick list choice set, because pick list choices come from an object. In fact, when you choose that, it's going to ask you which object that's from. So I can say it's from the case. Oops. Case. And if based on choosing the case object, I then can choose the data type. It's just a regular pick list, and which field. So I can say I just want the status field that they can now choose from. So now I've brought all the choices in the status object in. Now the downside of this that you have to be careful of is, at least with the pick list choice set, if you use this, it's going to bring in every choice in this field. So if you have certain statuses on this record type and other statuses on a different case record type, then this falls apart, doesn't work very well, because if you want them only to see certain statuses, you can't really limit what they see here on this pick list. However, the other choice you do have is a record choice set. So record choice set is basically a dynamic group of choices in a pick list based on related records, or records in any object. So it could be any object, but in this case I'm talking about is I've created a custom object, and that the user can create records all they want. So they can create, let's say it's a animals object. They want to be able to select all, put all the animals in there. Maybe they're a veterinary clinic. They want to say choose what animals are coming in for a visit, and they decide they're going to start taking potbelly pigs. They can go into the find the object for animals, which I have not created, so that's why you don't see it here. But they can come into the any object, and they can say, I want, if that imagine assets was animals, they can say, yeah, I just want to get all records in that object. I don't need to have any conditions. I just want to pull all the records in that choice set. And now I'm going to choose which field they're going to see. They're going to see hopefully the name of the animal, and it's going to be text, and the choice value. Let's say I want to pull in the ID of that record, because ultimately I want that ID to be populating into a related or to a lookup relationship field on this case, for example. So this is how you do that. So I just select the object. I select the choice, the label, so it's in this case the name, or I select the ID of the value I want stored, and that's ultimately what's going to get stored in when they go through. I can also store some other variables. So if I wanted to store, if there's something else about the animal, breed or something like that that I wanted to bring in, I could do that. I don't have to do anything there though if I don't want to, if I don't need anything else. And now I've got to select my choice, my animals, and now I've got a pick list of animals that I can now delegate that to somebody else. I don't have to manage the pick list, ad nauseum. I just, especially if something's gonna be updated frequently, that's changing day to day, let somebody else in the business take care of that. And I just provided them a means to update a pick list in a flow. So now this could be a lookup relationship on a standard record in Salesforce. You'd have to have that relationship set, because at the end of my flow, I need to then write the value that's in this particular pick list, animals choice pick list, and I've got to make sure I write that down into my record on the case. All right, so other things that are interesting, I think in Salesforce, if I come here to this screen, you'll see that you may have noticed earlier that I have on flow, I've got a radio buttons element. So again, this is something that doesn't exist on a standard Salesforce layout, but embedding a flow into my Salesforce page, I can now have radio button choices for input on that record. I don't have to be creating a new record. It could be just updating fields on the record that I'm looking at. But this is a way to maybe provide a more dynamic environment for updating the existing record. And I can pull in a radio button. And this is in lieu of pick list. They both use the same choices, whether I do a hard-coded choice, as you see here, or if I do a pick list choice from the object, or if I use the dynamic record choice like you saw me use a moment ago. All three of those will work just fine here within the radio button, just as well as they will in a pick list. Things I like about a radio button better than a pick list: doesn't have a default choice. You'll notice that if I did a pick list for this same thing, the print being the first choice will automatically be selected unless I put some none choice ahead of it. So that's one of the things in Flow that, it's a little annoying. I have a pick list and the first choice is automatically selected. It doesn't come up blank. It comes up with the first choice in your flow. So by doing radio buttons, if my list isn't too crazy long, it forces them to make a choice. I can make this required, and they have to select. They'll have to pick a choice, even though it's a required field. They try to go on without picking something, it'll give them an error automatically. But pick list is nice for that, in the sense that if you want to have the first choice be the default, that's great, because one of the challenges with using either dynamic pick list, from a record, or using a pick list choice, is you can't set a default value like I can here. So here, because I'm using choices, I can set a default value if I want. But on with a dynamic record choice or pick list choice, it doesn't have that option. It can't read from that object and give you a choice of a default value. But if you use a pick list, it will bring the first value in as your default. And if that's what you want, just make sure you define in what your first value is. And the nice thing, you also don't have to, I had one choice in that last screen, which I can go back to that if you want to see it. But I can change the choice here to be a dynamic pick list choice. But let's say I want it to be a specific record by default. They're always dogs. Is what's happening for the animals analogy again. If I always want the dog is the most common thing, so I just want that first choice to always be dog, because that will save them a click or two instead of having to choose from the list of animals every time. So if I make sure dog is at the top of my list, I can then that will be the first choice in the pick dynamic in the pick list if I use pick list. Whereas if I do a radio button and it has a dynamic choice or pick list choice, I have to. They have to make a selection before they can move on. So, which could be an extra click. Some folks are trying to reduce clicks. That's one way to do it. So the next thing I'll talk about is call Apex from Flow. So this is something that, similar to how I have this go to case action here, you have this Apex action, which is really great because I can now search for, if I have any, but I don't have any current Apex actions in this development org. But if I have this in my production org, and what we've done is we created, had developers create this, because I'm not a developer. So I have a team of developers. So I say, hey, we're trying to communicate to this third-party software, and they have an API, and Salesforce is going to have all the information that this third-party software needs. So we want to send it from this record in Salesforce over to this third-party software via their API. So that requires some Apex coding. So the team will build the Apex code. But what we find is, geez, I want to make sure that I want to validate this information is correct. I want to have somebody look at it before it goes over to this vendor. So if they're on their they're on the record, they can click a button or go to their flow, the tab in their flow. So they could just go back to their account. Let's go back to details. Here we go. Automation hour. So I could just go to, again, I don't have to have a button. I could have this would work just as well inside of a embedded flow. And on my embedded flow, they're going to just validate some information, and then they're going to click next or click submit to finish to send this off to the third party and send all that information in via the code that was built. So that can be done. That's done with this Apex action. So very handy for coupling, your Salesforce instance with all the data you contain with visual flow, so you can validate the information that's now going to get sent. And then when they click submit, finish on their flow, it actually is going to call out the Apex action. The Apex action will do its magic of grabbing the information that you've just validated and submitting it off. And I can, even in your flow, I've done this exact scenario where we'll pull in certain fields from the record, from an account record, for example, and they don't need to validate the entire account record. It's only a handful of fields that this third-party tool needs to reference. So I only pull into the flow the handful of fields that they need to look at, and when they And if they need to change it, they can change it right there in the flow. And changing the fields in the flow and clicking next, first action is it does an update. It does a record update, and it's updating all those fields into the record in Salesforce. Because when it calls the Apex action is reading back from that original record, which is now updated, and sending that information along. So again, great use case for coupling your flow with a third party code, which again, developer has to write the API. That's something where I lack the knowledge to do the Apex code on the back end. But hey, now they've given me the power to control when that Apex gets called. I don't have to write a trigger, and that's what I try to avoid as much as I can is triggers. I love classes. I love classes that do awesome things for me, and I love calling them when I want them. And you can not only can you call them from Flow, you can also call them from Process Builder. So if you have a process that when it hits a certain point, instead of having a trigger call it, if you want to fully automate that calling of that code, you can do it from Process Builder. And I've done that as well, which is again a great way to stay in control of your org, but still have some custom code that has to do some really specialized things that you just can't do declaratively in Salesforce. And third-party integrations is one of those things. All right, and then last thing on my list for today, and then I'll open up to questions, is validation rules. This is just more of a beware. Just be careful. It's very easy to set validation rules, and then they conflict with your flow. If you have a flow, the couple tricks that you can use are to, in your validation rule, put a field in your object that is bypass validation. And when you start your flow, check the box on that field, update the record, and then do the rest of your flow. At the end of the flow, uncheck the box and save the record again. And then your validation rule, you're going to say, hey, we're going to do this validation unless bypass validation is checked or there's true, right? So I'm going to say check the Boolean field, the checkbox field, and validate that it is false before I enforce the rest of the validation. If you don't do that, you have to make sure your validation rule is not conflicting with anything in your flow, that you're not trying to permit some behavior that your validation rule is preventing. You will get, and now the nice thing is you do get an email alert, and that nice little email alert from Salesforce saying, hey, we tripped on this validation rule when your flow is run by this user. So it gives you a heads up on which flow is affected, and maybe you can just go tweak your flow to conform to the validation rule, or go fix your validation rule. But this is the workaround helps in some situations where, hey, I've got this validation rule and they're in the record, they can't do this. But if they're running my flow, I'm giving them an exception. So it's a great way to provide for exceptions to allow flow, because flow is pretty rigid. They have to follow the steps, they have to follow the screens of the flow, and they only have access to what you put in the flow. So you can control it better than whereas a record layout, you might have a lot of stuff on there that's based on your validation rules you don't want them to mess with, but you want to have visibility or edit access in certain situations. So validation rules are good for that, but can definitely make your flows fail. So just be careful on that as well. So that is all of my presentation for today. Do I have any questions?
Yes, now you do.
All right.
Okay, so Michelle asked, can you remind me where you got the Lightning component to redirect to a new record? Is that
Yes.
Is that an unofficial flow component?
It is. So it's not a flow. This core action is an official flow component. So the core action right here is part of Salesforce. It is in the current Lightning flow tool. So the flow builder. So it's right here. The trick with it is, I'll go ahead and add it again so you can see how it adds. When I drag this in, you have to choose from available actions. The rest of these actions you see in here, besides the one that I added, are all standard Lightning actions. So you can actually, call one of these Lightning actions. I have not tested all these out, so I don't know exactly what all of them do. So it's worth, maybe put them in your flow in a sandbox and see what it does. But these are all, quick actions that probably do something like create an opportunity, create a note, create a lead, that sort of thing. So they're all out of the box actions Salesforce has provided. But the action to redirect to record is something Salesforce has not provided out of the box. So it's, but they give you the tools to build it. And that's where, and again, they provide the code. I'll look that up. I totally forgot to get the URL for you guys before I started the conversation here, but I will post it afterwards. But you can search for it right now. If you're searching in the Salesforce help, you can find navigate to record. I'm pretty sure this is exactly the terminology they used in their component, and they provided the 3 sections of code that you need to create the Lightning component. So again, I can go like the Lightning component. I can open this up here. The only thing, I can't see anything. I have to go to Developer Console to actually look at it. So this is again a way to open up your component instead of trying to hunt for it. So I can open up the component and I can see component, controller, and design. Those are the 3 elements that I had to set. And again, I didn't make this up. I just copied and pasted it from Salesforce support.
Okay. Kevin asks, does the new critical update check for null record variables or null values of a lookup relationship fields and process and flow formulas get around having to do the extra process builder checks?
Good question. My experience as at the current instance of Salesforce, you'll have the problem I described if you don't do what I did earlier in Process Builder. And in Flow, the same thing. I would recommend you validate if you get any records returned before you try to look up a field on a child record or a parent record, whatever the case may be, that without validating that you're getting a record return, that record's actually populated on the record from which you started. So my experience is that is still failed. Now, will the new summer release solve for that? I have not heard anything one way or the other on that.
Okay. Eric just gave some additional information to supplement what you showed. So the check for null can be the first condition, and the case.account.active can be the second condition, and it will work as well as adding a second criteria node. And I also posted in chat a link to Eric's blog post on how to tell Process Builder do nothing.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
That's good information to have for me too.
Rose comments, I am new to Flow. Is there a Flow step-by-step documentation other than Flow help?
Oh, good question. There's plenty of stuff inside of Trailhead, so I highly recommend you do some Trailhead on Flow. There's a whole process automation trail or badge that you can get that will go through a lot of different things. As far as any documentation, I've pieced it all together from folks like the next speaker is Brian Kwong. He's awesome. He has a great a site for all things Flow and Process Builder. I learned a ton just from him, so I got him to thank for a lot of the things I know. So there's plenty of resources out there as far as third-party resources. As far as Salesforce resources, frankly, they're not great. The stuff that's in their support site on help is very limited as far as it doesn't get into as much detail as I think I got into today. It does tell you kind of very at a high level what things are and how they work, but I would really rely on some of the bloggers out there and even past automation hours that they're posted just to learn more about Flow and Process Builder and how they work.
Great. Dominic says, great, thorough presentation on the capabilities of the new Flow Builder. When calling Apex from Flow, have you been able to get results back from a web service? Example, we can call an address validation service, checks format, zip codes, etc., and returns the properly formatted address.
So all of my Apex that I'm using right now are a dead end in my Flow. So I'm not using them in the middle of a flow. So I don't have experience with that specific use case of querying a third-party service and then trying to use that to move my flow forward. I'm not sure how I would get that to work because Flow just kind of keeps on chugging. I don't know if any elements in Flow, and I could be wrong, there could be something I'm missing, but of how if you could like send out for service and then wait for a response. I don't know that Flow has that capability, frankly, but it's possible it does. I don't know.
Okay.
But I use mine as my Apex has always been a terminus, like an endpoint, and then it does its thing.
Okay, Heidi asks, how about calling lead assignment roles from Process Builder Flow?
Calling lead assignment roles, that's a good question. So you're trying to look up, do a get record on a lead assignment role? Let's check it out. So lead assignment, that's a good question. So you can get to just about any object in here. If you can see it in here, then you can get to it. If you can't, then you probably can't. So looks like I can just see leads. I can see lead feed, lead history, lead share, but don't think I can see lead assignment is more of a setup element, and I don't think you can use flow or really any workflow elements to talk to setup devices in Salesforce. So I think the answer is no on that one.
Okay. Rows. I would like to be able to start a flow from a custom object, add data, and update or create contact records master detail relationship, and create the custom object record. There is data that we change from the contact record over time, and we want the information saved in the custom object when a person registers.
Okay, so you have a custom object that has a master detail relationship to a parent object of some kind. Am I understanding that question right? That's a long question. Can you repeat?
Yeah.
At least the first half of it, the beginning.
So I like to start a flow from a custom object, add
Okay.
data, and update or create contact records, master detail relationship, and create the custom object record.
Yeah, so that's completely feasible. So there's a couple different ways to create records, and I'll show you this to you here. You'll see that they've really streamlined things now in the new flow builder. That this used to be a lot more complex. There were a lot more elements for for doing fast lookups. If anybody used Flow before, it had fast lookups and fast updates. So now you have elements where you can create a new record just from a record variable, which is really great. So this was feasible in the past version. It was just labeled different. So I can create a variable that's going to be my contact, let's just say, and or contacts. Let's say I'm making more than one, and I can do a record variable, and I can have I can allow multiple values. That's where they used to call these things different names in the old builder, but it's a lot cleaner here. And so I can say, I just need a contact. Oops, type A, got contact, and we'll say, this is my contacts, variable. Let's say contact. Let's see, variable. So multiple. I have to do multiple contacts. Now I can create multiple contacts from this. I can say create contacts. So I'm kind of starting backwards. This is the end of my process to create all those contacts. Now to actually populate those contacts, I can just use an assignment element. So I can say set contact fields. And this is why I think I'd probably recommend this is the way to do it. So go contacts. First, I'll probably have to create a contact record first. Let's do this. And then I'll use loop to, or actually I'll use a loop to, actually run all this. But let's create a variable for my, one contact. And let's call this data type is a record, but it's a single record in this time. Contact. Here we go. And that done there. Okay, so now I can say my contact, one contact, and I'm going to say I want to set the account ID. That's my my parent record. I can say I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that equals to, and I can, in this case, create another new resource. Just spend more time creating resources. So if you have it all planned out, you can build all these resources ahead of time. But I can say this is my account ID, and it's just going to be this time it's just going to be text, or I could even pull it from a account record, but I won't bother. Actually, let's do that. So I'm saying account ID is good because that's easier to pass into the flow. So text, account ID, and nothing else. I'm saying this is my input variable. I started my flow from an account. So I can say that's now my account ID. No, I already had an account ID variable on there. That's okay. So I can say account ID. So now I can do another assignment. It says add to update record. So I can say, or update variable. Let's call it variable. This is really to use the proper terminology here. And so my variable is going to be now my my contacts that I'm updating, and I'm going to add my one contact that I just set, and I can create my records. So now it's just a matter of having a process that probably creates these, that sets these contacts based on information in your flow. But this is kind of the back end. This is the end of your flow. This is where you'd use, potentially a loop element to say, loop accounts or loop contacts. Done, and I could let's see. And I probably would put a different collection variable to start with, but I could not end here. I'd just say loop. So I'm going to say first for each item in the collection, do the contact assignment, then update the collection variable, come back to the loop. And at the end of my loop, I'll do the after the last item, after everything's set, I'll create it. So it's so it is completely feasible to do, I think, what you're asking for. It's just a matter of learning how, if you're trying to create multiple records, this is a way to do it. If you're not going to create multiple records, you could just do the one contact assignment. You'd say, I just need to set, I can add, of course, all my fields I can do through an assignment element. I just keep pulling up one contact, click in here, and I have access to all the fields I might want to set on a contact record. Every field that's available in the object is here. I could say, I just need to know the last name too, equals, and I could have, these could be variables that you set somewhere else on a screen in your flow. So you'd have collected this information in the screen. I'm just kind of skipping ahead to the creation side to show you that it is feasible to create a record related to the record you started from, or even just a separate record altogether. It doesn't have to be, I could be on a case object, and then because I know the case is tied to an account, I could create a bunch of contacts on that account. So that's completely feasible here, as long as I have a way to get the record of the parent that I'm looking for to set here. So in this case, having be able to get the account ID is important to be able to create contacts associated with that account. And you could have it, a screen that you could have a screen in your loop that says, hey, if you could have a screen that says, are there more contacts? If there are more contacts, you keep looping, you keep going through the loop to create more contacts until you say, no, I have all my contacts are good, and then you can exit the loop. So there's a couple different ways. You could have decision elements here that decide, do I keep going, keep looping forever, or do I have a decision that says, once I've had enough, then I'm going to jump out of here and go ahead and create the contacts I've just added to my update group. Does that answer your question? I know it's kind of complex. I hope it did. Am I still on?
Yeah, you are. So okay. 2 minutes left. Last question. How much Apex knowledge do you need to have in order to use Apex actions as a beginner with Flow?
Oh, so yeah, that's where I told you I'm not a developer, so I don't write any of the complex classes. I've written some very, very, very basic triggers and classes, and most of which I want to get rid of as soon as possible because they're not really well developed. The Apex actions that I've developed, you have to have some good Apex skills depending on what you're trying to do. I mean, it really varies. I'm actually trying to finish Trailhead on Apex just so I can have a working knowledge. It does help if you have some coding training or experience, like with Java, from what I've been told. Frankly, I've never studied or trained and learned how to write Java code. This is different from JavaScript, which I am familiar with, and I can write a little bit of JavaScript. But Java code is completely different. It's it's what Apex is based on. So if you have experience with Java, you can learn Apex pretty quickly. I've had all my developers that I've had do work for me had never touched Apex in their lives, but they had Java experience. And when I showed them, here's what I need to do, here's some sample code, they said, oh, no problem. And they wrote the code, and they had very, very small learning curves. One thing that they've told me, though, is that Salesforce is much more restrictive with the code versus what you can get away with in Java or any other programming language for that matter. So they get a little frustrated sometimes by the limitations of Salesforce, because Salesforce keeps you out of trouble. So that's one of the great things about Salesforce. It's hard to break it, and so they don't let you do a lot of things that would cause Salesforce to break, being that we're in a multi-tenant environment and don't want to shut down the whole system for everybody. So that's basically the experience required is some Java experience and some development experience to write those classes that you can then call from your flow.
Great. All right. And with that, we are at time. Thank you, Michael, for presenting. And I know you're coming back later on in the year to present again. So folks can register for that. Yeah.
September 13th. So don't miss out. And I'll hopefully see you all at Dreamforce this fall as well. So we'll see if I speak again this year, but I'll definitely be there.
Great. All right, with that, I am going to close out Automation Hour and we'll talk to you next time.
You got it. Thank you.
Bye.